Okay, now that we have everything up to the start of UVHM covered, it's time to start the journey towards the endgame. UVHM is where you will spend most of your playtime if you want to reach OP10, but there are some things you should know about UVHM before we get started. First, the enemies. The enemies you'll encounter will have 4 times the health they had in normal mode. 2x increase over TVHM. Slag will be a lot more relevant. I mentioned it in TVHM video already, but here is where it's really taken effect. Slag hit enemies will now take 3 times the damage instead of the 2x in TVHM. Adding to their health, all non-boss enemies will get a flat rate of health regen over time, which will get more ridiculous the farther you make it into UVHM. Then, lastly, every Vault Hunter gets a flat bonus to their swap speed when in UVHM. It's around the 60% increase and applies to every Vault Hunter. Also, UVHM scales with you, meaning that all missions and enemies will be around your level at all times. Now, onto the actual guide. We ended the last video on TVHM with some farming to prep for UVHM, but we are not quite done yet. There are 2 farms I do in UVHM before resetting the playthrough and actually starting to do content. I should mention this as well, you can reset the progress of your UVHM playthrough at any time. If you want to play through the story or certain DLCs again, it will reset all of your progress though, so every mission you completed will be reset. First thing we want to do is to head into the Snowmed Headhunter and farm the train chest for an E-Tag launcher. We will farm the chest on read only so that we don't get XP from killing the snowman over and over again. Those launchers, especially the Topnia, are very good options for second wins. They have an edge over regular bandit launchers because they have such a splash radius that it will hit enemies behind walls or cover, and they do very good damage, of course. Since this is the start of UVHM, I'm not too picky on what I take here. Generally I go either for a PBFG or a Topnia in either fire or shock. It can take quite a bit to get either of those, but thankfully there is a faster and more convenient farm for those that we will unlock later on. Once we have that, we'll head into the Scarlet DLC to get to this Grendel side quest again. Just as we did at the end of TVHM, we'll jump on top of Scarlet's boat to give the pirates an unfair fight. I just do this DLC until I unlock the Grendel quest because the class mod is all that I'm after. Because here we want to upgrade our Master Grenadier since our old one is level 25. At this point, blue class mods will have +6 and +5 bonuses. As in normal mode, I'm looking for a Master Grenadier with +6 in Grenadier and +5 in Steady, but you can get an Expert Grenadier, which will have the skills reversed. I like this combination though, since I found the extra grenade to be more useful. I strongly recommend avoiding Impact, however, since it's just not a very good skill. Its bonuses are negligible at best. After we got that, I reset the playthrough because I want to have these farms open again for later on. Right off the bat, we want to jump into some DLC to either get some key items or just to beat them early to unlock farms. First I clear Liasberg though, just to have the fast travel station unlocked. Then it's off to the Tina DLC. We travel to the unassuming docks and find ourselves in a role-playing game. Now, the item we're looking for isn't hidden too far into the DLC, but there are still some tricky fights ahead of us if you don't know what you're doing. Usually, the dragon's attack here will put you into fight for your life instantly, but you can hide behind this boat to not get hit. It doesn't matter since you don't actually bleed out from that attack, but it's just nice to avoid it altogether. Killing the skeleton really isn't an issue, and we make our way to Flame Rock. Once there, we talk to the NPCs and progress the quest along. When you get to the part of beating the Var Patron, you can stand in the doorway to block him so he can't run away from you, just so you don't have to chase him around. Then we can just talk to Torg and grenade jump over the fence to head into the forest a bit quicker. Here we follow the Queen's trail to Davlin. I don't bother fighting anything and just run through everyone. To get to the trees with the blood fruit, we can just jump over the fence here and get to the area quicker, and avoid having to run through the orc camp. Fighting the trees here can be a bit tricky, but there are some tricks to avoid them being a pain. Mainly the use of Teslas. Teslas can be used to block a lot of projectiles the game throws at you, and the orbs the trees release once they're dead are no exception. After we get those, we get back to Davlin and enter into the next area. I take this alternative path here to get to Davlin and to avoid the enemies. Then we gotta meet with the White Knight. I go through this graveyard, take out the big bone man, and lure some of the smaller ones into the next area. We'll be fighting some dragons here, and they can be a bit annoying to deal with. I lure the enemies here for two reasons. First is that they make for a good second wins if you go down. The second reason being that they'll distract the dragons long enough so we can run back to the overpass to get some cover. From here we'll use the Lady Fist and the bee to kill the dragons. I save quit after that just to teleport Roland to Davlin. We take the same path as before to meet up with them again. And then it's time for the Four Kings. During this fight, you'll have to keep an eye on your minimap as to not get overwhelmed and run over by all the skeletons spawning. Easiest here is to use the Lady Fist to kill the kings, then whittle down the floating head with your Herald. You want to use a non-elemental Lady Fist because the kings heavily resist all elements. You do that for all the kings and this fight should go over decently well.
Wait, what? That makes zero sense.
In the mines, you'll see this orb thingy. You can pay Iridium to get different temporary buffs from them. Here specifically, we are looking for the yellow buff, because this one gives you a speed bonus for a short time. We'll save quit until we see the yellow one, activate it, and run through the orc camp, avoiding all the enemies. Then, we take Brick's advice and run away again. We talk to the totally real wizard and go through the gate. Now we have unlocked the side quest we were looking for. It's the Beard Makes the Man quest that we want. Since if you accept this quest, you'll get the grog nozzle. You can think of this gun as a ruby on steroids. Instead of the 12% lifesteal you get from the ruby, you get 65% from the grog. Now, whether you like it or not, most of the late game of this game is not well balanced and you kinda really want this gun to comfortably play at higher levels. Before we continue on, I want to talk about a mechanic that I've mentioned shortly in the normal mode video that I want to elaborate further on here. I'm talking about drop reloading, because not only is it used to reload your gun, but dropping them in a specific order can be used for other things as well. Let me explain. Borderlands 2 works in a way where the second gun you pick up is the one that you spawn in with. So if you drop all your guns, the second one you pick up will be the one you spawn in with. But instead of dropping all your guns every time and picking them up, you can manipulate the order by just drop reloading. It works like this. If you have no quest items equipped, you hold the gun you want to spawn in with and you drop reload 3 times. Easy as that. There's another thing about drop reloading though. Obviously, every time you do it, you swap to a different gun. You can use that to always swap to a specific gun whenever you drop reload. For that, you just want to drop reload until you hold the gun you want, and then every time after that, whenever you drop reload, it'll swap to the gun you want to. You can use that to instantly swap to a healing gun every time you do it. If you want to spawn with a specific gun in hand while you have a mission item equipped, it changes to having to drop reload twice. So, starting from the gun, you drop reload twice, and you're done. Generally, it's just start by holding the gun you want, count the number of guns you have equipped that are not mission items, subtract 1 from that, and you'll have the number of times you need to drop reload. So, no mission item means you have 4 guns equipped, minus the 0 mission items, minus 1 is 3, so you have to drop reload 3 times. Okay, now that this tangent is over, we can continue with the content. We'll be jumping into the Fight for Sanctuary DLC now. This DLC is notorious for being difficult, and it really can be. The enemies have a lot of health and spawn with very dangerous guns, but it also has some of the most overpowered farms in the game, so I want to get it out of the way quickly. So we start off by changing our gear up a bit. Equip the Fire Lady Fist, the Sheriff's Badge, the Bee, and the Tesla. Since we have the Grog now, we'll be using the Tesla for this DLC. Starting the DLC, we'll be thrown into an assault on Sanctuary. The game tells you to repel the assault, but you really don't have to. You can just sit around and wait a couple minutes, and it'll auto-complete. After that is done, we clear the mysterious stranger's camp. We take out all the parts with the Lady Fist. After meeting Vaughn, setting up the firewall, and talking to the gang, we make our way to get the samples from Tannis. For the rest of this DLC, we'll be using the Shock Pimpernel and the Bee. The key to this DLC is to take it slow and pick off the enemies from a distance. After getting the second brain, I save quit to get to the area transition faster, kill the enemy there, and continue with the mission. Well, then we repair the turrets, fight off the waves of enemies, hop into a car after, and head to the place where Mordecai is gonna be. We meet Talon, kill the enemies there, and save quit. I recommend following Talon's clues from the safety of a car as to not get run over by the other cars that spawn. Once we have those, we're told to clear the camp and find Mordecai. We open the gate, kill the enemies right there, and now we have two options. We can either go through the camp the normal way, or we jump up the sledge, jump on the cactus thingy, and jump up the cliff to get to Mordecai faster. If you do it the second way, you can get a bit overwhelmed by the enemies after the cutscene, but you should have just enough time to throw your turret and a Tesla to help you staying alive while you kill the marksman there. After saving Mordecai, we go to the giant door, pull the lever, and save good once you get the checkmark. You can of course fight all the enemies, but I just don't bother. Then it's off to meet Brick. We head into the burrows, run through the first part, and then fight all the enemies with Brick. You have to be a bit careful here though. Brick for some reason is really strong and does a lot of damage, so avoid going into fight for your life since he's prone to stealing your second wins. Once in Helios Fallen, we can jump up the fences here to avoid the enemies in the first area. For the elevator room, I like to stay back and then pick them off with my Pimpernel. We take the elevator up, deal with the Lotus in the next room, and after that, I stand in front of the door where the enemies will spawn, throw a Tesla at that crate, cause those actually heal you for some reason, and kill the enemies. We go on further till we meet Tina, get the first two sets of components, and make our way into the bay. Here we'll fight a big clone of Saturn basically. You can run up to this place, stand at the back of this wall, and Uranus will not turn to attack you. We go back, let Tina press the button, blow open the door, and go back to the camp. Now for this next part, you actually want to ignore all of the enemies in the first two areas. Ignoring them blocks the other enemies from spawning, meaning that you can just run through the rest of this map without having to fight anyone. The Cassius fight can be a bit tricky, but if you keep your distance, keep him slacked, and hit his head with your Fire Lady Fist, you should do enough damage for him to die quickly. Also make sure to get rid of the tentacles as quickly as you can, since they'll break your B here. Now back in Sanctuary, I ignore the enemies in the first two areas again, focus on the tendrils to get the door to open, and run through the rest of the enemies. Up top, I kill all the enemies since it makes the bit after killing Hector a bit easier. Hector is notorious for being a difficult fight. You can either approach him head-on with a herald, whittle his health away slowly that way, or you can get rid of the two tendrils here, grenade jump up, and use the fire ladyfish with the B to hit his head that way. The flower thingies you can just hit by using the splash damage of your launcher, so you don't even have to leave your hiding spot. After Hector is dead, we get the Iridium, give it to Lith, and we're done with the story of this DLC. Now to unlocking the farms. We take the Vanguard quest from Vaughn, the Space Cowboy quest from Moxie, and the quest from Hammerlock. The Vanguard we'll do now, the other two we'll save for later. We take the flags and make our way to the first bandit chief. You can use a grenade jump to immediately get to him, or go around the normal way. Now we repeat the same with the second one, grenade jump up to his spot, kill him, and skedaddle. Then we watch the bandits jump to the death and get the next quest from Vaughn. Here he'll ask us to kill some sandworm queens for him. We'll want to turn on read-only before killing the first queen so you can farm her for the toothpick and retainer. We'll need both of those later on. Now if you only get one of the two from the first queen, you can turn off read-only, pick the item up, turn read-only on again, and go farm the second queen. You want to farm the queens here because while the regular worms can still drop the items, they have a much lower chance to do so. After we get those two items, we hop into the Scarlet DLC again. The objective here is to unlock the Grendel mission for the class mod farm and the Pimpernel farm for later on. We'll be grabbing both of those after we reach level 80. If you also want to get the Sandhog for later in the peak, you should stop before giving Herbert the tapes. If you don't care about the Sandhog, you can push all the way until you unlock the Pimpernel quest. We do this now because it's easier to get through now as compared to later at level 80. Since most of our gear will be very underleveled at that point, it would make going through this DLC a lot more difficult. Once we have those unlocked, I'd recommend beating the main quest of the base game. It's not required for starting the peak, but I usually like to do it because it opens up a lot of farms, and if you're new to UVHM, it can be nice practice to get used to it. Since I talked about the story in the previous two videos, I won't be going over it here again in detail. I'll only mention the most important bits. Everything is pretty similar to how it was in TVHM, so you can just use the gear you have to progress the story until you get to the bunker mission. Once you're there, get a new herald and a fastball, since the one you have will be a bit underleveled by now. And I get one of Axton's best corrosive weapon, the Hornet. Not only does it have a really good fire rate, meaning you can use it well with the B, the projectiles explode on impact, dealing grenade splash damage. That means that those explosions will be boosted by our boosts to grenade damage. I recommend capping your frames at 120 during this farm to prevent the loot from flying too far, since that is tied to frame rate for some reason. The higher the frames, the farther the loot goes. Then, I get a new launcher. This is where the toothpick and retainer come in handy. Because we took the mission from Hammerlock in the Fight for Sanctuary DLC, we can go to the Writhing Deep. This is usually where you'd find Haederax, but there's also a chest hidden here which will always have launchers in it. You can farm this to get easy Topnias. Whenever you have the toothpick and retainer equipped, you will run faster and jump higher, but only in this map. You can use that to reach the chest with the launchers. You can just farm for as many as you want.
What I will do with myself once the hunt is over.
After that, we can continue on with the story and potentially get some cool drops along the way. Once I get to the boneyard, I either get this just in mission to get a new bee shield, or I go back to the forest in the Tina DLC and farm the trees there for an upgrade. Once you have beaten the story or decided to skip it, we get to the most fun part of the game, the massive level grind to 80. There are of course many different ways you can get to level 80. You can farm bosses, do side missions, reset the playthrough and play it all again. It's really up to you. But when it comes to dedicated XP farms people do to power level, Axton is a real problem child. A lot of his farms are very slow and tedious. I will be showing off the two main ones in this video. First things first, get yourself the XP relic from the Good, the Bad and the Mordecai mission. Then, for the first method, if you haven't found one already, get yourself a longbow zero fuse singularity. We'll be using that to pull Badma off of the cliff near the entrance. Credit to Deceptics for discovering this strat. This strat can be used on any character, but most of them have faster ways to level. While you're doing this, you will run out of grenades quite frequently. To get more, I go into the Bloodshot, switch my playthrough to normal mode and buy them there. They will be a lot less expensive that way. The other main way is to use the skyrocket against the Hodungs at the end of the Clan Wars mission chain. You can spawn at the Lynchwood fast travel, run around and start chucking them at the Hodungs. Because of all the grenade damage boosts we have and the fact that the skyrocket levels with you, we don't need to farm any upgrades throughout this farm. In any case, once you have reached level 80, it's time to farm quite a few items for the peak. First, I get myself a level 80 bee shield. We'll be using that for the peak, so make sure you get a decent one. Then we get a herald, which we'll use for some general mobbing while we farm, and a fastball. The fastball will be our grenade of choice throughout the peak, so ideally you'd want to get a corrosive one, but a regular explosive one will work fine too. After that I go and grab a Topnia. This will be our main second wind launcher during the peak. Then we go to the Scarlet DLC to finish the farms that we had opened up earlier. We get a level 80 version of the Grenadier that we have now. As with the other ones, you can take the variant you like most. Then we go and upgrade our Hornet. As I mentioned before, this gun is really strong on Axton and we'll be using that throughout the entire peak, so also make sure you get a decent one here. And then we go to Tina DLC and farm this chest and the unassuming dogs for a chaotic neutral ranger. The max size and fire rate bonuses are really good for single target bosses. This class mod can spawn with the bonus points in the Grit. Grit is one of Axton's best survivability skills, so boosting that can be really beneficial. So ideally you want one that gives you +6 in Grit, but you can take any of them. The passive bonuses are good enough on their own. Then I beat the Snowman Headhunter and read-only found the chest for Legendary Soldier class mod. This class mod has a massive cooldown bonus, which, when paired with the cooldown relic, is going to be very useful in some fights during the peak. Lastly, if you haven't already, you can go to the Warrior to farm Iridium to max out at least the following STUs: Grenade, Sniper, Pistol, and Rocket Launcher. I still recommend at least having some upgrades to those. And this about sums it up for UVHM before starting the peak. There will be one more video in this series where I go over the journey through the peak. Let me know what you thought in the comments and feel free to like and subscribe. I also stream over on Twitch if you want to watch more Borderlands content. Thanks for watching and I'll see you around.